I'm talking, that because I've included them in some notes that you will be sent, and I think Anne mentioned that, and thank you to the library staff for doing that. It makes it so much easier. Hope everybody got a chance to go outside today. It was like the first spring day, very welcoming, and it's probably a good topic, attracting pollinators to your garden. We'll be talking about pollinators, of course. We'll be talking about pesticides, how to minimize or avoid them. We'll be talking about beneficial insects because people don't talk about them a lot, and they're very cool. Or talk about lawns, which are large tracts where there have to be many pesticides and few floral resources for the pollinators. And of course, talking about native plants, because that's basically what you're going to use to attract those pollinators. And we'll talk a little bit about the pollinator pathway. So here are our pollinators in Connecticut. And whether you think you want to attract them because they're beautiful, or because you think it would be fun to have bees, or interesting, or or maybe you want to do something for the bigger environment, it's all good. We're all on the same page. We're going to start with bees because they're the most important of our pollinators. And you may know that there's two kinds. There's honeybees and the native bees. And both are important for their pollination services. And bees are like hairy little dust mops. And you can see the bee at the top has collected pollen in its little sac, and they're designed that way so that they can spread that pollen around. So a little biology lesson of what pollination is. A flower, in order to go on and produce seeds, needs to have pollen taken from one flower and moved to another flower. And that's where your insects, bees, come in. They do that very nicely. They come to the flower to drink the nectar, and in the process, their hairy little bodies pick up pollen, and then they go to the next flower, and that pollen gets distributed onto the stigma where now the plant is happy. And it's a love story. And it's spring after all. You know, the flowers need the bees, and the bees are happy to do their thing, and it's lovely. So how this all came about over time, if you think back of flowers, I don't know, eons ago, I guess they realized they needed to attract pollinators. So they developed certain ways to lure those pollinators in, and maybe it was scent or color or design or shape. And the insects finally realized that these new flowers were out there, and that there were attractants there that they would be interested in. So basically, your native plants and your native pollinators were made for each other through years of evolutionary adaptation. And of course, that's why we want to use native plants in our gardens. And the bees are out there already. This picture was taken in mid-March, and those are cellophane bees on some crocuses. And people are always surprised when, you know, they know that they've got maybe little crocuses or some kind of little flowers in their yard, but they think, oh, it's too cold for the bees. No, if the flowers are there, there probably are bees. So go out and look and observe. Pollination is necessary for 80% of the plant life, and the other 20% is pollinated by through the air. It's windborne, and right now, many of us are kind of susceptible to all that pollen in the air, and we get scratchy throats and stuffed up noses, but this is what happens in the spring. But anyways, bees are a keystone species because they're necessary for that process to happen. And the word keystone is an architectural term, and if you look at that arch, the stone in the middle is the one that, if it were to fall away, the whole arch would decompose. It would fall in. And bees are a keystone species, and this little cartoon says, if we die, we're taking you with us. And I think that, you know, they feel pretty self-important, as they should. So there's been a lot in the news about how bees are are facing extinction, but you know, this was back in February of 2016. That's what, 6 years ago. A UN report says many species of wild bees, butterflies, and other pollinators are shrinking towards extinction, and the world needs to do something about it before our food supply suffers. I think it's not only our food supply, it's whole habitats that are supported by these pollinators. So in 6 years, I think we're beginning to realize it and make some changes, but we have a lot of catching up to do. Because the decline of all insect populations is alarming. And I think we need to appreciate insects in general, because they also support ecosystems and the food chain. Bird populations also on the decline and correlates with insect decline. So if you want to attract birds to your yard, you need to have insects there. And I just showing this one because we often think of caterpillars, or we don't think of caterpillars as an insect. But we have to remember it's part of the life cycle of a butterfly or a moth. So if I'm talking about caterpillars in your head, you can kind of say, oh yeah, butterflies. That's why they're important. They're important for other reasons, because they're essential to the food web. Caterpillars actually transform the energy in the plant to protein sources for other species. So, and that's really important to have a lot of caterpillars in your yard or in the neighbors' yards, because baby birds almost exclusively are fed on caterpillars. If you've ever watched a nest of baby birds and watched the parents bringing caterpillars, it seems like 24/7 to those birds, you realize that somehow those caterpillars are available. We need to keep that happening. So why is it that there's these declines? Well, there's the two biggest factors are habitat loss and fragmentation, which are related. They're not exactly the same thing. And the other factor is pesticide exposure. And we all know what's happening with our former farmland is being gobbled up with development of residential or commercial developments. And what has happened is that these larger tracts are fragmented, so that you've got places where, I wish I had a pointer, but you can see that the green areas, the open spaces, are not necessarily connected. Now with honeybees can go about 4 miles from their hive with no problem. Native bees travel about 1/4 of a mile, depending on which native bee you're talking about, and some don't even go that far. So it's in their interest to have connected habitats. Habitat also is lost from invasives, and we know we have invasives. You'd see them along the roadsides, and they have replaced valuable native plants. The picture on the right was taken at the end of my road. They were some good evergreen trees, and they've been decimated by the bittersweet. And the picture on the left, of course, is knotweed, which you can find all over. It's very invasive and aggressive. So where we have stands of invasives, that land is no longer really valuable to wildlife. Pesticides, we're defining pesticides as pesticides, herbicides, rodenticides, anything that ends in -cides. And one of the problems with them is that they're overused or improperly used. People don't read the labels, or if they do read it, they don't pay attention to it. And we should not assume that just because they've been registered by the EPA, that doesn't mean that they're safe for us to use. And there's multiple reasons for that, which we won't go into now, but you just should not make that assumption that they're safe just because you see them on the shelf. Well, why do we use pesticides? We think that we're helping to solve a problem. They're also available everywhere. They're relatively inexpensive. They're highly advertised. You can't turn on the TV without seeing a commercial for a beautiful green lawn by some company. And they're pretty easy. And I think we have a need for control. And you see this guy here, he's sitting with all these remote controls, and he's going to control crabgrass, and he's going to control the knotweed, and he's doing it the easy way. I'm not saying that he's lazy or that he's wrong. I'm just saying it's too easy to pick up a can of something and think that we're solving the problem. So this is the law of unintended consequences, that pesticides can harm other organisms, and you can see the list there. Oh, and I found this cartoon, it's just great. I think it says a simple system, and you can almost imagine this little guy with this can of spray something. And then he tries to regulate a complex system, the complex system being nature. And, it just doesn't work. So I think we have to realize that what we're doing may have effects other than what we set out to accomplish. Neonicotinoids have been in the news for probably, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 years now, and they're of particular concern. And the biggest item on this list here is that they're systemic, meaning that they go into the whole plant. So the leaves, the pollen, the stems, the roots, everything gets affected by the neonics and contaminated by the neonics. And neonics can be lethal or sublethal to bees, but it's not good either way. There's a bill at the Connecticut legislature right now, Senate Bill 120, and that would prevent the use of neonics on lawns by professionals. Right now, as a homeowner, you can't buy neonics to put on your lawn for grubs or whatever. But this bill would keep the professionals from doing it. It would also keep chlorpyrifos off Connecticut golf courses, where it's really not needed. And there are alternatives for both of these. So we're not putting everybody in a bad position of not being able to deal with their turf or whatever it is. They can do it, but it just takes some willpower and takes some advocacy groups. So we're hoping that you will support Senate Bill 120. And this whole slide basically says that you don't have to replace a chemical with another chemical. If you're looking at some kind of pesticide and you think, well, this sounds kind of toxic, maybe I can find something that's less toxic. It might be better to don't think about chemicals. Think about there are biological controls, there's insecticidal soap, there's physical intervention, and non-toxic substances and heat. So it's just kind of a mindset. It's like, let's stop thinking about chemicals. Let's think of alternatives. Okay, insects. I think we need a fan for insects because they're really very cool. 80% of the world's animals are insects, and about 20 million insects for each living human. So don't skeeve out. Most of them are very small and they're very innocent. They're just doing what they were meant to do. They serve a number of purposes, and 95% of them are beneficial or benign. So who are our beneficials? And here's some of the bigger, prettier ones. We have the lady beetle, the soldier beetle, and you can see the others. However, most of them are quite small, and some of them are not very pretty. But again, they're doing what they meant to do. And I love this quote. It's by Jessica, and I can't see her last name, but they are traipsing about our yards and gardens, eating and parasitizing many different pests, and generally doing a fabulous job of keeping their world in order and doing it unnoticed. So they're the superheroes of the garden. Now, you can see from the drawing that you've got a pest there that's eating on something in your garden. And as his population increases, then the population of the beneficial insect also increases, but there'll be a lag time. But eventually you'll get to the point where hopefully the pest population will be reduced. So the question then becomes, how do the beneficials know when they're needed? And this is so cool. We've known for a while that plants communicate through chemical signals. It's that network of chemicals underneath the ground where they send out messages to each other. But now we've learned that when plants are under attack, they send out messages to the beneficial insects. So this is plants talking to insects, which is just kind of blows your mind. And who knew that? So in our gardens, don't panic if you see that a plant has shown signs of being munched on. Hopefully the beneficials will be on the way. Hope is coming. Help is coming. And if you need to do something, you can probably spray with some water, and that may help for a while. And Doug Ptolemy has said a plant that has fed nothing has not done its job. And he doesn't mean the deer. He's talking about the plant insect interactions. And I think it's a different way of thinking about our gardens and our plants. not too many years ago, if I found that my favorite plant was being eaten by something, I'd be horrified. And now I realize that maybe if I leave it alone, it'll be all right. And it's actually fed some insects, and some beneficial insects have grown in their numbers, and everything's in balance. And that's kind of what we're looking for in our garden, is a state of balance, and try not to interfere with that too much. Yeah. And here's a nice chart of some of our insects and the things that they prey on, and also the plants that they're attracted by. And it turns out that it's not all native plants that they might be attracted by. Sometimes it's dill, sometimes it's dandelion, sometimes it's clover. Fennel is frequently used by beneficials. Caraway, things that are spicy, I think, spearmint, fennel, lemon balm, all those good things. So those are good to have in your yard if you want to attract the beneficials. Okay, lawns. This is a common sight, unfortunately, in Connecticut. You have like a 2 or 3 acre zoning. You've got a house, and then you've got 2 or 3 acres of lawn. It's not really something that the bees enjoy. This is what a bee sees when he looks at our lawns. There's nothing there that enhances him or entices him, because it's just grass. It's blades of grass. And it's huge. Across the United States, 50 million acres of managed turf. And lawns are the single largest, most toxic crop in the country. And if you think of it, it is a crop. We plant it, we water it, we fertilize it, we grow it, we cut it. We're kind of enslaved to it, actually. And homeowners typically use 10 times the amount of pesticides and fertilizers per acre as do farmers on their crops. And there's some reasons for that, but part of it is marketing. But this is life in the suburbs. I think, city life, we don't have those expanses of lawn, and out in the country, you've got more fields, and it seems to be a suburban phenomenon. And it's big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. It's very lucrative. And you can see the corporation here, he's, reeling in the money. And he's, they've convinced us all that we need these chemicals. But the EPA, and this is surprising that EPA said this, EPA estimates that only 2% of the active ingredients in herbicides ever reach their target plant. The rest goes into soil, groundwater, and the atmosphere. So that being said, we can see that drift is a problem. We can see that these chemicals can wash into our stormwaters and get into the streams, lakes, and even our underground water supplies. And they're easily tracked into our homes and into our car interiors. Weed and feed is one of my favorite targets. I really wish they would go away. It's a combination of herbicides. It's usually 2,4-D, which is very bad for children and pets, and also a synthetic fertilizer. And we shouldn't be using synthetic fertilizers. We should use organic fertilizers. However, this stuff is sold all over the place, and it's broadcast onto an entire lawn. And therefore, we use 20 to 30 times more herbicide than we really need, because you may need herbicide in maybe 10% of your yard, but it's being distributed on 100% of your yard. Birds and
can you draw the attention?
Yeah.
Can you just say that?
Can people please mute themselves? Thank you.
Yeah. Also water resources, because, as we said, the stuff gets into the groundwater. And these products have been banned in Canada. And this picture just makes me laugh. That's a marijuana plant. The cow is weeding and feeding, and one operator is muted. Yeah.
Somebody needs to be muted.
Hopefully everybody's muted by now.
Yeah.
But you're going to say to me, oh, those weeds in my garden, but in my lawn, but we need to tolerate some weeds, the violets, the clover, the dandelions, especially because they provide early season floral resources for your early emerging bumblebees and other bees. And for crabgrass, a pre-emergent such as corn gluten can be applied, much better than putting down the 2,4-D products. And you can actually learn what weeds you have in your soil if you identify them and then find out what soil conditions may be altered to reduce the weeds. And a good source is Organic Lawn Care by Paul Tukey. And I have that listed on my handout. And this is kind of what my lawn looks like about the middle of August. Maybe some of you have had the same experience, but we've learned that because most of our lawns are cool season mixes, they don't do well in the summer. It's okay. It will green up. The rains will return and you'll have a green lawn again. Don't panic. Just some simple changes can make a big difference. We're asking people to mow less often and mow high, 3 inches. 3 inches is going to be enough to provide enough shade so that the lawn stays cooler and drier by itself, and it allows the roots to get deeper so the whole lawn is healthier. Leave the grass clippings, that provides mulch. Encourage clover and tolerate violets and dandelions, that's for the bees. Leave some bare ground for nesting sites, and leave some autumn leaves for overwintering pollinator insects. So the other options would be NomoMay, and I think you have a NomoMay initiative in Weston. You can go organic, you can reduce the size of your lawn, or you can let some of the lawn go unmowed. And the reason we have NomoMay is because those wildflowers that come up in the lawn in May, April and May, are actually excellent floral resources for the emerging bees that are coming out of hibernation. And they have a tough time at that time of the year. There's not much else in the garden. Our garden flowers aren't really in bloom yet. So if we can leave those for the bees, so much better. And it works. It turns out that lawns that are not mowed in May have 5 times the number of bees and 3 times the number of bee species. So that's proof of the pudding right there. Now, your neighbors may kind of look at you. And I have to say, we did this last year, and my neighbor came over with kind of a worried look on her face. And she said, you know, my son noticed that your lawn wasn't mowed, and we wondered if your tractor was broken. We were offering to mow it for you. I explained it to her. We were not mowing it for a reason. And, you know, life goes on. If people don't understand it, well, you can explain it to them. If they don't get it, okay, you know, but I think we have to do what we feel is right for us. This is a great handout. It's an organic lawn care calendar, and it kind of goes by the seasons of what you should be doing, what pests you might find, and what soil amendments you might want to use. And the only thing that they're suggesting that you put down, the only additives would be things like maybe some nematodes, beneficial nematodes, some compost tea, some organic fertilizer, and maybe some corn gluten to deal with crabgrass. Those are basically the only products that you should be putting down on your lawn if you're going to do an organic lawn. This, not only is this a calendar, but there's 2 pages of attached details. So that'll be in the handout that you receive of how you can download this. So to reduce the size of your lawn, you can always use ground covers in certain areas. You can plant underneath trees. You know, you can read the list. I don't need to. But I think if you're looking at the picture, it's like, how much prettier is that than just having lawn? That's gorgeous. And this could be sort of an enhancement of NomoMay if you find that you can live with the higher grass, and you have a little spot in the back. Maybe you can just let it grow up for the season and see what happens. I think you'll be surprised that there'll be some wildflowers that will come in there, and you'll have a little meadow all to your own for you and the bees. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about native plants, there's such a wonderful variety, different colors, shapes, and different times during the growing season. And once you've planted them, you'll have them year after year. And as we talked about, they've co-evolved with native insects. So absolutely made for each other. They'll grow in poor soil. They don't, you know, they're just easy peasy and beautiful. Now, it turns out that some pollinators require specific plants. And you probably all know about the monarch butterfly and how they need milkweed leaves, not to eat, but to lay their eggs on, and then for the caterpillars to eat. And then there are also specialist bees who require specific host plants. And I think they've got a longhorn bee there on the New York ironweed. So it turns out that while all native plants are good, some are better than others in terms of supporting pollinators. And we need to plant for caterpillars, meaning butterflies and bees. And this is an excellent list of the keystone plants, and this was made possible through the National Wildlife Federation and some other good organizations that got together and did this. And that's also on your handout list. So it would just be great to look at this list and maybe go from the top down. And when you choose some plants for replacing plants in your yard, or maybe you've got a new garden going in, you might as well choose things that are beneficial to what you're trying to do. But there's all kinds of native plant lists that you can get on the internet, and all kinds of books and resources. You don't necessarily have to use this one, but I thought it was particularly good. So your keystone perennials, they're fairly common. Things like goldenrod, asters, woodland sunflower, black-eyed Susans, etc. And beautiful. And we frequently think of perennials when we're thinking of planting for pollinators, but trees and shrubs actually provide more flower resources than the smaller plants. So don't forget those. Spice bush, willow, blueberry, etc. And oaks, the white oak in particular, according to Doug Ptolemy, supports 534 species of caterpillars, more than any other native tree or plant. So if you can, plant an oak somewhere if you've got room for one. They're just amazing. But there's other plants too that support lots of caterpillars and bees. So where can you buy natives? You might have to look around. You might have to go for a little ride. Although, you can still get them at the big box stores. You have to look very carefully though. It would be good to know the botanical names if you're going out, and make sure that you're getting what is really a true native. A lot of them have been crossed with other things. Yeah, called cultivars, and they're called nativars. And I'm not saying that they're bad, they're just not as good as the true natives. But if you go to nurseries like Earth Tones and Native in Fairfield and Gilberti's and Nature Works, you can pretty much be assured that you're getting native plants. And many of the plants that look like wildflowers are in fact natives. So if you like that wildflower look, then natives are for you. So Doug Ptolemy says we are replacing native plants with alien species at an alarming rate, especially in the suburban garden on which our wildlife increasingly depends. So again, it's a shift in thinking about your garden. Are you going to plant things that look pretty, that you like? Sure, we all do that, and we've done that for years. Now we're going to add on another criteria that says, are we planting for something that's going to do something good for the wildlife? And you have the power to change this by the plant choices you make every time you buy a plant and plant it. And when you plant for wildlife, you're going to have a yard that's diverse, it's healthy, it's balanced, sustainable, in line with natural processes, it's beautiful, and it's alive with life. Yeah. And what better way to celebrate Earth Day, which is coming up. The Pollinator Pathways, when I first heard of this, I'm like, what are they talking about? What on earth could that be? And it's really an invisible aerial highway that the pollinators will find and use, because it connects parcels which are safe for them to use as habitats. So safe meaning that there's nesting sites, there's floral resources, there's no pesticides, and they're close enough that they're available to various species. And it's a growing phenomenon, started in 2017, and now there are over 200 towns in Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. It's really taken off big time. And you can be on the pathway. You can join the Western Pollinator Pathway. There's one in Westport. I think all the towns in Fairfield County have a pathway. And all you have to do is add some natives. You don't have to go crazy with it. Just buy a couple and plant them, or put them on your deck, or in a flower box. And of course, you're not going to use pesticides, and you need to rethink your lawn. If you do those 3 things, then you can sign up. And it's scalable if you have a large property, or if you just have a deck that you can put a flower box on. It's all good. And it makes you feel good. It empowers you. It makes you think that you're taking charge, and that you're helping the better good. And it's a success. Mary Ellen Lemay has said the initiative, as launched by the Protect Our Pollinators and the Pollinator Pathway, have grown astronomically in the really short time. It is truly remarkable. In my 20 years working in conservation, I've never seen anything like this. And Drew Toher and Beyond Pesticides said, your efforts to create a pollinator pathway are ecologically sound and incredibly important. And what happens with these individual towns, the pathway is a little different in the way it's structured, in that it's very grassrootsy. So each town has its own way of developing, or they may have their own events that they sponsor, their own gardens. A lot of them establish gardens, and they have garden tours, and they get a lot of information out. And the other thing is, though, that they're very involved in working with other groups that have common goals and common interests. So it's a wonderful way to spread the message and to work with other groups and hopefully make that change. So the take-home messages are to support pollinators in your yard, plant native plants, do not use pesticides. Insects are an essential part of the food web, and we need to appreciate them and root for them. And not be afraid of them. Some people are still afraid that bees are going to bite them, and that very seldom happens. Lawns are an ecological wasteland, so we need to think of ways that we can minimize that land mass and make it friendlier for everybody, really, because not only are they big, they're full of toxic stuff. If you've got, lawn care professionals that come in and put things down, it's probably not the safest environment for your grandchildren or your pets. So we should plant for wildlife, which sustains natural processes and promotes diversity. We haven't talked about biodiversity. I think that's something that you understand. It just means a large number of things in your lawn, different species of plants, animals, whatever. But I think biodiversity equates to healthiness, because if you have a monoculture of something, then it's subject to weather changes, it's subject to insect damage, diseases, things like that. If you've got diversity, then you're going to have more healthy species. And I think that's true with a lot of things. And everything is connected. You can't, Mother Nature is, she's pretty wise in the way she managed to fix it all up and make things work together as a unit. I think when we go into our gardens, it's not just us and the flowers. We should be aware that there's soil bacteria that are helping us grow the flowers. There's insects that help us in many ways. There's the whole food web is involved in the weather, and it's all connected, and we kind of have to be aware of that and honor that. And how we manage our gardens and lawns affects our neighbors' yards and beyond that. So not only are you doing something for your yard, but maybe the bees that are happy in your yard will go to your neighbor's yard too, and it will spread. So that's what I have for you today. Well, timing was okay. I was afraid I was going to go too long.
No, that was perfect. So do you want to stop sharing your screen? And so we
sure.
could see if anyone has any questions.
How do I stop sharing? Okay, stop share. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, so if anybody has any questions for Mary, you can unmute yourself and please ask.
I have quite a few, but you want me to just ask them? Mary, I wanted to know what you think about, the only thing I use in this yard is Repelzol for the deer. It's the eucalyptus oil, the clove oil, that kind of stuff. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that particular spray to get onto some flowers that the deer just will munch on? I find it effective, but I want to know what you think about it.
Oh, I think that's fine.
Mhm.
Any of these things, especially if they work, that's good to know that it works.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
no,
works well for me.
I have no problem with that.
Or I plant mint. They hate mint. So you put mint in your flowers. And I have a question about disposing of commercial cut flowers. I think they're extremely toxic, and I don't think that I never put them in the woods. I put them in the trash because there's commercial flowers are so toxic.
It's
So I
probably,
want to, yeah.
I think that's a great thought. Yeah, no, I would put them right in the garbage. I usually don't buy commercial flowers because I
Right.
like to grow my own, but yeah, on occasion I certainly have, and I do put them in the garbage.
Well, some people give me commercial plants as a gift. And so then if
Oh.
they get scale or they're not working for me, I want to toss them. But, and can you get clover seeds? Can you spread clover seeds along the lawn? And I have deer and groundhogs here like crazy, but I like them. So I just didn't know if the groundhogs eat a lot of flowers. They don't seem to come up to the flowers. They stay on the grass pretty much, I think.
Okay, well, the first question has to do with clover, and yes, you can get white clover seeds. What I would do is mix it in with the grass seed if you're, overseeding the lawn in a certain area.
I'll find out. Oh, there's a lot of crabgrass here this year, and I just told the landlord it's not my property, but I still take care of it anyway. So a lot of it's dead. It seems to be one kind is completely dead, and so I'm going to look into this corn gluten.
Well, we just spread it around. This is the first year that I've done it, so I'll let you know next year if it worked, or let you know in the fall. It's supposed to work. It's probably not 100%, but if we can do away with some of that crabgrass, because it can get really, really nasty.
And I have one more question. I have a very long garden here that's all mulched, and it's got grass in it, grasses, ornamental grasses, some hydrangea-like trees. And then there's some evergreens, but there's a lot of ground cover. There's a lot of ground there, but it's so full of weeds. They're so well established, these weeds. And so my question is, considering the amount of roots in the weeds that go sideways and they're everywhere, can I still plant pollinator flowers and they should probably make it? Even with that root system that's so thick and it's everywhere, these same weeds everywhere.
What weed is it? Do you know?
I do not. I could find out, but it's just, you just can't get rid of them. And if you don't pull them, then they get very, very tall. So I was wondering if I'd like to put in some pollinator there, not just in the containers on the deck.
Yeah, if you've got an invasive there, which is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Usually the invasives are more aggressive than anything you're going to plant, unless somebody else in the group knows something. It sounds like the issue is that the invasives should be dealt with.
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, and I'm renting this. It's not my property, and the landlord has somebody come in and pull them up and put mulch down, and it does nothing. It's such a waste of time. But anyway, all right, thank you. And can we contact you? Because I wanted to let you know about something that's going on in Fairfield with a guy redoing trees, all for the insects, Audubon, everything. I wanted to let you know about that.
Thank you. Yes, you'll be getting the notes tomorrow, and that has my email address and my phone number. So I would love to hear from you.
Oh, it's really interesting. I'm sure you'll like it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Want to talk about coconut?
Anybody else? I did have a question, Mary, about, you said it's okay, just start simple. Is there a certain percentage that's best to aim for? Like, I have established gardens before I really even knew the difference between natives and non-natives. I planted some things that are natives, like a lot of black-eyed Susan and bee balm, and they kind of spread around, which is great, but there's other things that spread around too, like garden phlox. And so it's kind of a, you know, a mixture, but should we aim for a certain percentage of natives over other plants?
Well, if you read Doug Ptolemy, he says 30%. If you can get more than that, that's fine. But, you know, we're all starting out with whatever we started with, you know, and we're adding natives all the time. So it's, you know, you get as many as you can, as much as you can. More than 30% would be greater, would be better, of course.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, if no one has any other questions, I think we can wrap up the program. Thank you, Mary, very much. This was very informative. I will post the recording, and I will be sending out your notes to the people who registered for the program tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was wonderful. I can't wait to get started. It's going to be very exciting to me. I'm all
Thank you so
excited.
much.
I am.
Yeah. We've all got garden fever now with the sun.
Yes.
Tangle.
Now that I have sun, yes, thank you.
Okay. All
Okay,
right.
bye-bye.
We've
Bye-bye
had good
now.
rain too.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
There you go. Back.